The last photograph Veronica Ellis ever uploaded was a candid shot, her arms draped over her partner, Mark, both grinning in front of the rustic entrance to Blue Ridge National Park. The Blue Ridge beckons off the grid with my favorite person, demand mountain magic. Torch Appalachian adventures, she captioned, sunlight flecking through the tall oaks behind them. 64 friends liked the image in the first hour. The comments were peppered with good wishes and eager requests for trail updates. Stay safe, you two wild souls. Don't get eaten by a black bear. Bring back stories. No one suspected this buoyant image, shared at 7:52 a.m. on May 3, 2011, would be the last digital echo Veronica would leave behind. For years, the mystery absorbed not only her family, but the whole tight-knit town of Willow Rest on the Appalachian slope. It would be over a decade before the truth, sealed away in a half-collapsed cavern high in the Smoky Mountains, emerged to upend everything the Ellises thought they knew. For what the world would learn far too late was that the most profound dangers often hide not among shadowed forests and uncertain weather, but inside the hearts of those we least suspect. Veronica Lynn Ellis was, by all accounts, the opposite of reckless. 34, a senior trauma nurse at Asheville Regional, she'd seen in the ER how quickly one mistake in wild country could turn deadly. Obsessed with lists and backups, her coworkers called her the double-check queen, for a reason. She never, ever trusted a single battery or med dose. In life, her carefulness extended beyond the sterile corridors of the hospital. If an adventure with Mark Harrison was on the calendar, she'd spend days plotting route maps, meal portions, and contingency plans. Mark, 3 years her senior, had the same cautious streak, cultivated by a decade as a wildlife biologist, charting the salamander streams and bear dens of western North Carolina. His colleagues at the State Forestry Department often joked he'd someday invent a backpack that packed itself. He took redundancy to an art form, even carrying a stubby roll of duct tape for emergencies. They'd met at a wilderness CPR seminar 8 years prior, drawn together by a mutual, quiet awe for the Appalachians' grandeur and menace. Their home in Willow Rest was a shrine to preparedness. Every gear, shelf lined with labeled tubs of water-purifying tablets, topographic maps edged with neon highlighter, emergency beacons, micro spikes for winter ice, and enough freeze-dried chili to survive a month's isolation. Their adventures were ritual, and though they'd hiked the Green River Trail, Old Stone Gap, and dozens of other routes, no place rivaled Blackberry Hollow, a wooded gully famous among hardcore Appalachians for its resilient wild azaleas and secret trout streams. That was where Mark had knelt beside a rushing brook and proposed 3 years ago, as deer ambled softly behind a curtain of mist. Every May, as the dogwoods bloomed, they returned. Those who knew them had little cause for concern when, in 2011, Mark shared his meticulously color-coded itinerary, weather tracking, backup meal plans, and planned check-ins with Veronica's younger brother, Tony. The couple was, in every visible way, prepared for anything. Mark even carried a new GPS-enabled rescue beacon, its signal strong enough to reach satellites through the thickest forest cover at least, so the manual claimed. On the morning of their departure, May 3rd, Mark loaded their weathered Jeep Cherokee, a vehicle that looked as if it, too, could survive a Black Mountain winter. Beacon? Check. 3 days of food? Check. Fresh batteries? Check. First aid kit with extra antibiotics? Check. Their precision was almost comic, but it was why, across dozens of trips, Veronica and Mark had never faced calamity. Driving through farmland painted spring green under morning fog, Veronica curled up in the passenger seat. She'd worked a double shift and barely slept. The trip was her reward, her escape hatch from alarms and hospital machines, a return to the earthy silence of the mountains. Mark's last text, pinged Tony's phone at 8:04 a.m. as they crossed into the park. Heading in. Love to you and the kids. See you Monday. The tradition was simple, a digital promise to return and close the trailhead register on the way out. At the head of the Blackberry Hollow Trail, Mark filled out the weathered logbook, while Veronica sorted their packs with surgical precision. Only Deer witnessed their final human words, as both signed for a return date of May 6th, emergency contact listed as Tony Ellis, cell number inked in confident loops. On paper, the system was foolproof hikers. Overdue would trigger a search, and with the new beacon, everyone expected a routine. Rapid rescue should anything go wrong. The weather that morning was ideal. Crisp, cool air. Faint mist rising off the mossy boulders. The National Weather Service forecast nothing worse than a mild afternoon rain, and maybe a stray thunderclap, the kind every Appalachian hiker learns to expect. But what the forecast missed, a rare convergence of humid Gulf air and a sharp, cold front swooping over the hills, was already brewing above the ridges. In hours, what began as a gentle drizzle would become a flood capable of reshaping the land. At 9:11 a.m., with backpacks snug and boots laced, the couple disappeared into the forest. The Blackberry Hollow Trail curled through thickets of mountain laurel, their pink blossoms crowding the edge of the path, offering glimpses of distant misty gaps framed by ancient chestnut trunks. Sunlight dappled through tangled leaves, flickering across the muddy track as they walked into their last normal hours. Veronica's Instagram post, now preserved by her family, would become a mournful artifact, her face luminous, Mark's hand protective on her shoulder, both beaming with the unguarded joy of people who think, rightly or wrongly, that their world is perfectly under control. A local couple, out for a day hike, noticed them around 9:30. They looked like pros, one would recall during the later search. Packs neat, not a thing hanging loose. You could tell they'd done this 100 times. This routine observation would someday gnaw at the rescue teams. How does a duo so prepared, so admired for caution, simply vanish from such well-trodden hills? The first few miles along the Blackberry Hollow Trail snaked through open canopy, with sunlight shimmering across ferns and low-bush blueberries. Mark and Veronica walked in comfortable silence, pausing only for the occasional snapshot, a glistening spiderweb, a fast-moving creek. Their GPS ticked away contentedly, carving out a digital trail through the wilderness. By noon, they reached the valley's edge, where ancient stone outcrops funneled the wind through crevices, creating a persistent, mournful whistle. Here the forest grew dense, the ground soft beneath years of fallen pine needles. Phone reception vanished, just as the couple expected. Mark sent one last text from a rocky knoll with a faint bar. Making great time. Gorgeous morning. Love you, Tony. The message would become a painful milestone, the final confirmed contact from the missing hikers. Around midday, the sky began to change. What was a tapestry of white clouds shifted quickly to dense gray, the temperature dropping so subtly that even experienced hikers might shrug it off at first. But soon, a heavy, humid stillness blanketed the woods, as if the mountains themselves were bracing for something titanic. At 12:38 p.m., the first fat raindrops fell, tapping out a rhythm that quickly swelled into a pounding deluge. Within 20 minutes, the small streams that Mark and Veronica had easily hopped over became viscous, roiling currents. Water sluiced down the hillsides, carving new channels and loosening stones that hadn't moved in decades. Their last GPS ping placed them in a narrow gorge famous for its unstable slopes, a place locals knew to avoid in spring. Veronica, an old ligament injury flaring in her ankle, moved carefully. Mark suggested they seek temporary shelter from the increasingly violent weather. The forest, so recently a haven, became menacing. Thunder rattled between ridges, rain lashed the trees sideways, and somewhere above, the sound of tumbling stones spelled disaster. The couple's years of experience and their caution meant they never would have risked crossing the collapsing ravine, as investigators would later deduce from tracks left in the mud. Instead, the two huddled beneath a rock overhang that, in drier years, would have been a bear's den. Mark unlatched the emergency beacon, attempting to broadcast a distress signal, but whether due to the thick stone above or moisture seeping into the electronics, the light only flickered and died. Hours passed in a liminal, anxious terror. Veronica rationed their water and food, icing her swollen ankle, while Mark kept a meticulous log of their dwindling supplies and their physical states. Both had weathered mountain storms before, but never anything this ferocious, this relentless. By dusk, the rain eased, but the damage was done. A rock slide, its edges still trickling with rainwater, had sealed the narrow mouth of the overhang, trapping them inside. Attempts to shift even the smaller stones proved fruitless. It was just enough room to sit up, but now the close air carried the chill of encroaching despair. Days passed in a haze of hunger, cold, and silent hope. Their batteries died, cutting off any chance of rescue from a panicked family or search party. Veronica's ankle grew worse, darkening and swelling. Mark continued to record every detail in a waterproof notepad. Hiking habits die hard, even as both recognized that rescue was becoming unlikely. The search began, as always, with quiet worry, growing into full-blown panic. On May 7th, Tony Ellis, unused to a full day without a text or call, alerted park authorities. The Jeep was located at the trailhead, as if abandoned mid-adventure. Untouched granola bar in the console, fresh socks neatly folded in the back seat, camera batteries stacked just so. Rangers, followed by local deputies, retraced the logbook's listed route. No sign, no calls. The forest seemed to have swallowed them whole. By the next morning, Willow Rest rallied. Old hiking friends pored over worn dog-eared maps, comparing notes on every storm-broken side trail and hidden switchback. Local volunteers offered their time, while search teams with dogs swept the valley. Helicopters scanned the sodden hills for the beep of a beacon, but nothing pierced the emerald silence. Then came the first discovery: Veronica's distinctive navy cap, wedged between two rocks near the edge of a now swollen stream, battered and torn as if carried miles by current and collision. Spirits sank a sign of disaster. The search redoubled, but the mood turned grim. Each piece of evidence multiplied the mystery. The e-beacon, designed for such emergencies, should have summoned a rescue, yet had been eerily silent. Experienced, properly equipped hikers vanishing without trace, especially in a region so fiercely loved and traversed, was unheard of. Days became weeks, grief thickening in the small town like fog. Searchers found only ambiguous hints: a scrap of backpack strap, muddy boot prints that might have been weeks old. With each failed lead, hope grew thinner. Tony, refusing to yield to statistics, hired a private investigator, Eleanor Maddox, an ex-state police detective, who specialized in long unresolved disappearances. Maddox reviewed every drone photograph, weather record, and interview, searching for the smallest inconsistency. It would be years before her methodical questions bore fruit. From the moment Mark and Veronica vanished, Willow Rest changed. Hikers grew careful, tourists asked nervous questions, and each spring, the community gathered at Blackberry Hollow for a somber memorial beneath the wild azaleas. Unsolved cases grow roots in the psyche. In the absence of answers, rumors and wild speculation flourish. Hidden caves, wildcat attacks, a wrong turn that spiraled into tragedy. For many, the pain was not just the loss, but the utter lack of closure. the sense that there was still something out there in the hills, waiting to be discovered. As the first anniversary of Veronica and Mark's disappearance approached, Willow Rest was no longer the same cheerful mountain town. There were new scars, unspoken, but present in the wary glances exchanged by neighbors, and the way hikers now checked in with family far more obsessively. The annual memorial hike became not just a gathering, but a ritual families leaving flowers, maps pinned with hopeful notes, "Don't give up," and a silent vigil at the trailhead. Each year, more attention drifted toward their story. Local news stations retold the saga every spring. Missing in the Blue Ridge, the perfect couple lost. Amateur sleuths on internet forums debated possible outcomes. Was it an accident? Foul play? Had they chosen to vanish, staging a disappearance and fleeing to some new life? Some even whispered about Appalachian folktales creatures and spirits who lured the unwary off the path. But for Tony Ellis, and those who truly knew the pair, no theory could answer the fundamental question: how does two of the most prepared people in the Carolina Mountains simply cease existing? Eleanor Maddox, the private investigator, shared the family's skepticism of wild theories. She became a familiar figure in Willow Rest, her notepad, always half full of scribbled diagrams, timelines, and possible routes. She tracked everything from bank records, untouched since the day of their hike, to gear purchases, and even patient hospital logs back at Asheville, to rule out hidden debts or secrets. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Veronica and Mark had neither the motive nor the opportunity to stage a voluntary disappearance. Year after year, the forest gave up little. The same mossy logs, the same shifting stones, the same silence staring back at searchers. Drones buzzed the ridges. New tracking dogs swept trails for old scents. But all they ever found were traces too old or too ambiguous to lead anywhere. 3 years later, a fragile lead surfaced. A fisherman on the Little Piney River, 15 miles from the original search area, hauled in a weathered hiking boot. Inside, partially preserved by river silt, was a scrap of waterproof notebook, the kind Mark always carried. Legible muddy writing read only, May 4th. Rain, ankle sore. Mark's worried. Beacons still not working. The handwriting, unmistakably Veronica's, reignited speculation and sorrow in equal measure. The discovery deepened the mystery. If the notebook washed this far, had Mark and Veronica tried to cross the river, hoping to reach a ranger station? Or had floodwaters scattered their belongings, while their fate was sealed far from where anyone thought to look? The terrain, already dangerous, would have been a death trap in the days following the storm. As more years trickled by, and as memories faded for most, for Tony, the need for answers festered even deeper. He dedicated every spare weekend to hiking those ridgelines and hollows, sometimes alone, sometimes with Maddox, sometimes with local volunteers who still remembered the couple's laughter at summer BBQs. Their story became the region's unresolved heartache. Just past the 10th anniversary, a twist of fate and climate finally tipped the balance. In the damp, overgrown July of 2022, a rock slide, triggered by heavy spring rains and ongoing erosion, exposed a narrow cave on the northern face of Blackberry Ridge. It was mere luck that 2 geology graduate students from Appalachian State, cataloging new formations as part of a climate impact study, noticed the raw, freshly moved earth and peered inside. What they found would end the question that had haunted Willow Rest for more than a decade. Inside, in the cave's cool silence, 2 sets of human remains lay side by side, skeletons curled as if in sleep, surrounded by the faded outlines of camping gear, decayed clothing, and a waterproof notepad, still mostly intact, near Mark's outstretched arm. Authorities closed off the area within hours. It was Maddox, still quietly persistent after all those years, who received the call from the sheriff's office, her voice trembling as she dialed Tony's number. Forensic analysis confirmed the heartbreaking truth. Veronica and Mark had died within days of the storm. Veronica likely first, crippled by a badly infected ankle injury. Mark shortly after from dehydration and exposure. The rescue beacon, battered and ruined by water intrusion, was found with them, its circuitry corroded beyond recognition. The device had attempted to send a signal, forensic engineers would later deduce, but the thick geology and storm damage meant it was never received. But among the remains was something unexpected. An old revolver, its barrel corroded but partially loaded, and faint traces of a single fired round in the cave's stone wall. The discovery sent a shudder through everyone involved in the case. Had the gun played a role in their final hours? Had Mark, in despair or mercy, or at some outside threat, attempted to use it? The notepad might hold an answer. Only the notepad's last pages revealed something even darker than the wilderness's cruelty. The discovery of Veronica and Mark's final camp shook not only Willow Rest, but all of western North Carolina. In the weeks after the cave was found, every headline from Asheville to Atlanta revisited the vanished hikers, now with the promise of long-awaited answers. Yet, what was found inside the waterproof notepad disturbed even the most seasoned detectives. Mark's curly, precise handwriting filled page after page, methodically recording their efforts to ration supplies, update each other's condition, and keep hope alive. The first entries were clinical: diet logs, attempts to free the cave's entrance, weather observations. But as the days dragged by and their situation grew ever more grim, the tone shifted. Each entry revealed more rawness and desperation. On May 5th, Mark wrote, "Storm washed out trail completely. Rockfall blocks entrance. Veronica's fever going up, ankle dark purple. Used all antibiotics. Beacon still dead. No lights. I try not to show my fear. She says she trusts me to get us home." By May 7th, he acknowledged what they'd both been avoiding. No rescue, no water left. Veronica sleeping now breathing rapid, skin ice cold. And in the margins, one final repetition, as if the act of writing burned it into his memory. "Tell Tony she was brave. Tell her she was everything to me." Then, space several blank lines, as if Mark could no longer bear to write. The next entry was different. The writing wobbled, and the words trailed unevenly across the page. Night. Something outside. Thought I saw light, movement, voice, but maybe only wind. Veronica gone. Tried to go after. Collapsed. Just want to sleep. Gun here. Found it buried under old pack. Don't remember having it. Not sure what's real. Under blacklight, investigators found faint indentations, scratches almost invisible to the naked eye, as if Mark had pressed a pen so hard the page beneath bore the mark. Using specialized imaging, detectives discerned a series of words and numbers, a cryptic code that Maddox recognized, with a sick jolt, as a field cipher the couple sometimes used when prepping for worst-case scenarios. When decoded, the message was chilling. Not accident. Someone here. Watched us. Gun not ours. If found, tell Tony trust no one. The implications shook the entire investigation. For years, everyone had assumed nature's violence. Flood, injury, exposure was responsible for the tragedy. But if someone else had been on the ridge, and if the revolver was planted, the disaster may have involved something far darker. Detective Maddox, now at the center of the reopened investigation, pored over every detail from the old case files. Among the few who'd known the couple's exact route and plans was Tony Ellis himself, but also several others. Mark's old research partner, a mentor with a grudge, local guides, even the tiny Appalachian hiking community, where everyone knew everyone else's business. Soon, it became clear. In the days after the disappearance, a local man named Nathaniel Poe, a former friend-turned-rival of Mark's, had been in the area, ostensibly to collect rare salamanders for the state. Poe had always had a complicated relationship with Mark, a partnership soured by accusations of data theft, professional jealousy, and rumors of an affair years earlier with Veronica during a rocky patch in her marriage. More alarmingly, Poe's own revolver matched the description of the weapon found in the cave. In the original search, Poe had even been among the earliest volunteers, helping comb the ridges and speaking as a concerned local expert to news reporters. Confronted by the newly unearthed evidence-corroded revolver, Mark's encoded warning, discrepancies in Poe's alibi investigators re-interviewed Poe at his dilapidated mountain cabin. At first he scoffed, denying all involvement. But then, under pressure, details emerged. Poe had been on Blackberry Ridge that day, had confronted Mark and Veronica over old debts, and had brought a gun to scare them, but claimed he'd left them alive and unharmed. He'd simply panicked during the storm and fled. But now the pieces snapped together, and a picture of jealousy, resentment, and opportunity emerged. Perhaps Poe had intended only intimidation, but events spiraled: flood, rock slide, isolation, and the gun had been tossed or forgotten inside the cave as chaos reigned. In Willow Rest, the revelations rocked the community. The unsolved mystery that had haunted them for years was not just nature's cruelty, but a deadly cocktail of envy and betrayal. And yet, no clear answer. No prosecutor could pin manslaughter or murder on Poe without more evidence. The cave had held only silence and bones. For Tony Ellis, the revelation was its own torment. He had lost his sister and best friend, not just to a storm, but to a secret rivalry he never suspected. The final memorial service, held in spring 2023, was more than a commemoration. For the first time, Tony spoke publicly about the price of secrets, the fragility of trust, and the Appalachian wisdom that darkness sometimes comes, in human, not just natural form. The trail was renamed Ellis Harrison Walk, and a simple wooden plaque marked the site. Love endures all storms. Truth, too, will find its way through mountains. And so, in the wild Appalachians, the story joined the wind. Not just a warning about wilderness, but about the dangers that can grow in any heart waiting for their moment, here among the ancient secret-keeping hills. Years passed, but the story of Veronica Ellis and Mark Harrison never entirely faded from the ridges and hollows of Willow Rest. The annual memorial walk became a new tradition, drawing hikers from all over the Blue Ridge. Each spring, families paused beneath the wild azaleas to remember two souls whose love and caution could not outpace the dangers of secrets, whether born of nature or man. For Tony Ellis, closure came in quiet ways. In the stillness of dawn hikes, the laughter of his children echoing on old trails, and the simple wooden plaque, where Veronica and Mark's names were carved not just as a warning, but as a reminder that some mysteries resist easy answers. His grief, once a consuming fire, tempered into a sober wisdom. Trust, he learned, is as fragile as mountain mist and as precious as sunlight after a storm. Eleanor Maddox returned to her life of unresolved cases and quietly earned the respect of Willow Rest for her persistence and humanity. She sometimes visited the plaque herself, leaving wildflowers and a silent prayer for all those lost not just to wilderness, but to the storms raging within ordinary lives. Nathaniel Poe, never legally charged, faded into the background, haunted by his own isolation. Whether truly guilty or simply the latest chapter in the Appalachian tradition of secrets, his presence remained a somber thread, occasionally discussed in hushed tones over campfires, as the shadows stretched long on summer nights. For Willow Rest, the lesson endured. Preparedness and love matter. But so too does humility before the unpredictable, be it weather, wild hills, or the unpredictable tangle of human hearts. Veronica and Mark's story lives on, guiding new generations of hikers to double-check their gear, share their plans, and most of all, cherish the hands they hold as they step into the unknown. In the end, the Appalachian wilderness kept many of its secrets. But one small truth, carved on wood and carried by the wind, persisted. Love can guide us through the darkest forests. Yet even love is sometimes powerless against the shadows that walk beside us, unseen